This episode is sponsored by MSCI Wealth, offering portfolio construction, management, and proposal solutions that help wealth management firms personalize portfolios at scale and support long-term growth. Leveraging over 50 years of expertise in indexes, risk analytics, private capital, sustainability, data, and more, MSCI Wealth helps deliver the personalized experience clients demand. Visit msci.com/wealth to learn more. Welcome to the WealthStack podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rosic, Director of WealthStack Content Solutions. Today, we're digging into one of the biggest opportunities and challenges facing modern advisors: how to deliver deeply personalized portfolios without sacrificing scale or efficiency. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Govinda Quish, Managing Director and Global Head of Wealth Management Product at MSCI. And Govinda brings a really unique perspective, having co-founded Fabric, the cutting-edge proposal and risk analytics platform now powering MSCI's next-gen wealth solutions. And we'll be exploring how MSCI Wealth is helping advisors move beyond cookie-cutter models and unlock true personalization across the entire book of business. A lot to unpack there. Govinda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, I do want to start with your background. And I always joke with my guests that this is actually going to be the hardest question you'll get this entire conversation, because I want to know, listeners want to know, what makes Govinda personally and professionally. And if you don't mention your love for horses and polo, then I'm cutting this podcast off right now.
Yeah. So we'll start with my professional background. So on the professional side, I've really spent most of my career in the single family office and multi-family office space. So I've worked in single and multi-family offices in Switzerland, in Hong Kong, in New York, out of London. And the role that I've played has pretty much always been the same, which is really on the portfolio management, asset allocation, and really using technology as a way to implement portfolios, manage portfolios more efficiently, and to understand and work with risk management. So a lot of my background has also been focusing on how to manage a portfolio through the lens of both the risk management, but also using technology as a tool to really understand the asset allocation and methodologies. And then on the personal side, as you mentioned, I've spent quite a bit of time with horses. So when I was living in Zurich, Switzerland, I discovered polo and then ended up spending quite a bit of time in Argentina. And to this day, I enjoy spending a lot of time with my horses, and now we're coming into the summertime. So, I enjoy spending a lot of time with the horses and playing polo as well. Yeah.
Well, you and me both. Tech and horses, two of my favorite topics. So I love when they collide. And I know polo season is in full swing. So hopefully I finally get a chance to see you play one of these seasons.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. I would enjoy that if it ever stops raining here in Colorado, that is.
Which is unheard of. I know we're in uncharted territory right now. It's very strange, but I know we'll be regretting saying that in about a month when everything is brown. But
yeah.
But I digress here. I do want to talk about your previous role as CEO and co-founder of Fabric, which in a very simplified explanation was a risk management solution. But now with MSCI acquiring the firm back in 2024, how does that now fit into MSCI's current mission?
Yeah. So as I've talked about, I think with you in the past, Shannon, Rick Bookstaber and I founded Fabric out of a project that we did at the University of California Pension Fund. And Rick Bookstaber and I have worked together on and off really for the last almost 20 years or so. Now, when we founded Fabric back in 2017, 2018, we actually decided to work with MSCI going all the way back to the beginning. So we have been using MSCI's analytics and MSCI's models to power the back end of Fabric even before we were purchased and integrated into MSCI at the beginning of this year. So that really was a partnership that goes back, quite quite a few years now. And then when we got to know the folks at MSCI, and as they began to look at how they could increase their wealth offering and provide a more comprehensive offering for the wealth space, it was really a very natural fit. And so, since we were acquired by MSCI, the opportunity set has just really expanded. As you mentioned, we started with a strong focus on risk management and portfolio construction. But MSCI is really, as many people know, one of the global providers of analytics for portfolio construction, for indexing, and so on. And so what that's allowed us to do is continue to grow with MSCI, to expand into tax optimization and forward-looking analysis that is tax aware. They're one of the leaders in the understanding of impact portfolios and how to design and implement portfolios to have a social impact, if that's what the client would like. And then also the factor-based analysis, and really taking this factor approach that MSCI has been a pioneer of for understanding risk and portfolio construction, and really applying that to portfolio personalization in a way that's very scalable.
And like you said, most people know MSCI for its indices and institutional analytics, but how is MSCI now expanding its value proposition for advisors?
Yeah, so historically, MSCI has really provided content to asset managers, right? Whether it's asset managers to use the indexing to create ETFs, whether that's to pension funds and sovereign wealth funds around the analytics. And really what we did at Fabric, now called MSCI Wealth Manager, is really looked at how can we take the powerhouse of portfolio construction and really rules-based portfolio construction. If you look at an index, right, which is what MSCI is probably most well known for globally, is its indexing. And an index is nothing more than a rules-based portfolio construction, right, which is using technology at its core. So if you can imagine taking the core of what MSCI is offering in portfolio construction and how to do that in a scalable way, right? Which is, they've done globally, and then apply that to the individual client portfolios. And so rather than simply serving the asset managers, which is what MSCI has done in the past, actually going to the wealth managers and working with them in ways to create greater efficiency, greater scalability, and ways for them to grow their businesses using MSCI's analytic framework in ways that have never been available to advisors before, and also the home office team for portfolio construction. And a lot of that just comes down to the design of the proper user experience and workflows that actually are made for the wealth management industry use cases.
Well, I appreciate the background and the context, and that's a perfect segue into our first segment that I call Stats All Folks. And MSCI made this very easy for me to pull stats because actually, according to your own team's research, only about 10% of advisors today are using technology to personalize portfolios at scale. Why do you think that's the case, and how can that number grow?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things we did when Fabric became part of MSCI was MSCI put a global survey out in the wealth industry globally to really ask a handful of questions, and this was one of them. And we were surprised to get this information back. But I think that part of the reason why that is simply because a lot of the technology out there, there's some great companies out there and there's some wonderful new technology, but in the advisor space, a lot of the technology is very outdated, right? And in order to create personalization, you really need, if you think about personalization, you think about every aspect of our lives, whether it's how we watch television, how we work out, so how we shop, so much of our lives now have been personalized using technology, using data, using machine learning. But this notion of personalization and the technology available to create that in the wealth management space is just getting started, right? And I think there's a lot of reasons that it didn't happen in the past. The computing power that it takes to do that personalization in a scalable way hasn't been available until just recently. The types of analytics that we need to analyze and work with the large sets of data. So I think, there are reasons why it hasn't happened in the past, but really MSCI is taking and has made a huge commitment into being an industry leader in portfolio personalization for the wealth space going forward. And when you think about it, everyone's talking about large learning models and machine learning, but what we know, because we're all listening to the podcast and we're all learning as much as we can about the space, is what that comes down to is the data that you have available for that machine learning process, for whatever you're trying to implement. You really have to have the underlying data sets in order to power those models, because the models are only as intelligent as the data that we provide. So when you think about it in that context and think about the data that MSCI has across the different aspects of our investment and financial industry, that really allows us to be in a unique position to really be a leader and pioneer in this area of portfolio personalization. So I hope that answered the question somewhere in there.
No, absolutely. And to your point, you mentioned we're in an age where clients really expect that Netflix level personalization or Amazon experience, whatever you want to compare it to. So how can advisors deliver portfolios that truly reflect each client's unique goals and risks and values without necessarily adding hours to their workflow? What trends are you seeing driving portfolio personalization in the industry? Is it simply the fact that folks are just more educated and there's more available? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think that that's a really important point that you make, Shannon, is that what in part is really driving that is the client expectations, right? So clients and whether it is the baby boomers, which are now a very large, but now as it passes on, the wealth, as we all know, is moving from generation to generation, and we're at the beginning of a huge transfer that so whether it's the folks that are in the baby boomer generation or the generations on down, the level of technological savvy just keeps going up and up and up. And as they become more technical, as the consumer of wealth, as individuals become more technologically savvy, they simply become more and more demanding because the resources are at their fingertips in order to understand and measure what matters to them, so to speak. Yeah.
So let's dig into MSCI Wealth Manager a little bit more because, again, at a high level, kind of described as a rules-based platform designed to streamline client portfolio management. Could you just elaborate on how this particular approach enhances the efficiency and consistency of portfolio design and proposal generation for advisors?
Yeah, I think, again, it comes back to MSCI's core capacities and core competencies around, again, think about indexing and think about the precision of tracking some of the most diverse indexes around the world, right? And that's really what MSCI does so well. Or if you think about the data and analytic content around, here are my personal values and what I want my investments to go towards, or here's a thematic exposure for what I think are important themes and how I want to represent those themes, right? As we go through all of that, really MSCI is uniquely positioned to provide that data.
And I've heard you talk before about the, quote unquote, advisor first design that comes along with this platform. What does that mean in practice, when you're building tools at MSCI?
Yeah, so this notion of advisor first design very much comes back to that we have built the Wealth Manager application, really going back, starting with Fabric, literally thousands of conversations with the individual advisors, the home office, portfolio construction team, as well as the PMs who are responsible for the rebalancing and ongoing management of those client portfolios, right? So what we've done is just spent a lot of time with the end user, understanding the workflows and understanding the problems that they're trying to solve for, and making sure that we're doing that in a way that really that makes sense to them. So rather than saying, okay, we've got it all figured out and we know best, let us give you an ecosystem that forces you to do things our way. We're actually going to listen to you and what you've said and what your needs are, and make sure that we're sensitive to that, I think. Yeah.
And another topic I want to dig into is around proposal generation, as that's another aspect of the platform. Why has this become such a critical area for innovation? And how does the platform empower advisors to really turn all that data that you talked about ultimately into action?
Yeah. So, it's a big question and a very important one. So, this notion of personalization at scale, everything that we're doing at MSCI Wealth in support of the advisor and in support of the wealth management industry, all comes down to the advisor-client relationship. And there's the advisor-client relationship that happens throughout the life of the client-advisor interaction. And then there's a relationship, the pre-relationship, which is when the individual walks in the door and says, okay, I need a new advisor. Help me understand what you can do for me. Here's all of my current statements, and show me what you can do for me, right? And so this notion of proposal generation, one of the things that we did, again, with a focus on this advisor sensitivity, being very advisor focused, was we took some of the existing technology at MSCI, some of the machine learning technology that they use elsewhere, and we created a statement reader that allows advisors, when the prospect comes in the door, you can have a stack of 200 pages of statements. You scan those in, and then the machine learning tool pulls all the information out of those statements directly into the application. Okay, so where I'm going with this is it's small things like this, using whether it's machine learning, large language models, ultimately to empower the advisor to create a beautiful proposal and an elegant, easy to understand representation of either where the prospect is relative to where they want to be, or where the current client is and how they got to where they are now, and are they on track to get to where they need to be in the future, and representing this in a visual way that is intuitive and easy to understand, because this is just core to what is being demanded by clients and what is critical to provide. So there's a lot in that whole realm of proposal generation, but that sort of core is really being able to help the clients understand, here's where you are today, here's how you got here, and yes, you're on track to get to where you need to be tomorrow, in a very easy, simple to understand way.
Well, it seems like in the past too, a lot of proposal solutions and tools kind of fell short of the needs of advisors and their clients. And so, if you had to lay out what I guess the utopia would look like between the client advisor experience, what does that next gen advisor experience look like when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think from our view, what that next gen advisor experience looks like is one that, again, is very technologically enabled, right? So whether that comes down to something like using the AI-based tool that we have to pull in statements, or then how to visualize, right? The visualization tools that we have in order to represent what the current environment looks like, what the future might look like, to do simulations. And then there's also part of what we've pulled in is tax transition analysis, which is also a very important part of that. So it's really forward-looking scenario analysis around taxation And what's happening there is the ability to simulate forward-looking analysis of how different dynamics in the portfolio might impact the client's tax situation as well, right? And so it's really using different tools to be able to help the advisors understand with their clients and represent to their clients how their current environment looks and how that might look like going forward across taxes, across risk, across portfolio analytics, and so on.
Well, speaking of forward looking and personalization, I want to dig into a big trend that we're seeing. And it's this shift where clients are very interested in private markets. You know, retail investors
Yeah.
are, they're just demanding opportunities, whether it's private equity, alternative assets. And your platform offers a feature to analyze private assets. So I'm curious, how does the Wealth Manager assist advisors in modeling the risks and returns, things like private equity and real estate within client portfolios?
Yeah. So, as some people in your audience might know, um, the MSCI purchased the company called Burgess also last year around the same time that they purchased Fabric. And so MSCI is now one of the largest providers of whether it's private credit, private equity, real estate, infrastructure, data, and analytics in the industry. And so what we've done is we've begun to integrate that private asset data into Wealth Manager. And a challenge that a lot of advisors are having today that we feel that we solve for very well is that more and more advisors are using private assets in client portfolios. And there's new ways, more liquid ways to access those private assets. The challenge that many advisors are having is how do they actually integrate those private assets into a client portfolio? And how do they demonstrate and show the value that are provided by the private assets? And how do they show the issues related to liquidity and transparency? So as advisors begin to adopt private assets more and more, which we think is wonderful for more and more investors, it's MSCI really has the analytic tools because, of course, MSCI is very well known for its work with institutions, whether it's sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, or so on, which hold tremendous amounts of private assets as a percentage of their portfolios. So this ability to work with private assets is really something that MSCI does very, very well and is becoming more and more important in even the mass affluent wealth space.
Absolutely. So, with our ever evolving industry and just the landscape of tech and wealth management, talk to me about the MSCI roadmap. What future enhancements or features can folks expect coming down the pike here to even further support, these personalized portfolio constructions and management?
Yeah, so I think the things that we really want to emphasize. So as I mentioned before, we have this notion of tax-aware portfolios, right? So any change that you make in the portfolio, either with a new client coming in the door or with an existing client, the ability to actually bring some of the tax optimization, tax loss harvesting in-house in a way that's technologically empowered and much more scalable than anything we've seen in the past. There's also the use of custom direct indexing, right? So whereas oftentimes advisors have had to outsource a lot of the ability to do custom direct indexing, we're in the process of building in the functionality of, again, MSCI, very powerful indexing company, and to give at a very affordable way the ability of those advisory firms to bring that work in-house, right, to insource that. And with that insourcing creates very powerful functionality around customization or personalization at scale. So combining that with also the tax optimization functionality is a very part of our forward-looking roadmap. And then also with this notion of customization at scale, the ability to work with hundreds, if not thousands, of portfolios at once in a way that is scalable and in a way that is personalized at the account level. And then, of course, there's a work that we're doing with private asset data that continues to expand and continues to expand. And then, last but not least, as everyone is talking about these days, but is a very important part of our industry, is the work with large language models. And again, looking at what are the layers that we want to build for the wealth management space using our data to inform some of those large language models in order to add greater value and efficiency to the advisors. And really what that is about is scalability. That's the challenge that advisors face today, is how can I scale my practice in a way that doesn't impact the quality of service I give to each client. And what I would say there is, with the technology we have today, and as the technology continues to improve more and more, that is a problem that has become very, very solvable.
Well, I love to end that on a positive note then. That is
Yeah.
certainly solvable. Well, thank you for that, Govinda. But it is time now for segment 2 of this episode that I call Ask Us Anything. And I have gone out to the social universe and asked folks to submit questions they want answered by you. And we had some folks slide into the DMs this week. So I'm going to put you in the hot seat if that's okay.
Okay. I like the hot seat.
All right. First question we got. How do I convince my firm to move away from cookie cutter model portfolios when it feels like a compliance and scale nightmare?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And really what that comes down to is technology. I would say that right now, many firms are using Excel, right? Many firms are using a hodgepodge of Excel and PowerPoint and Microsoft Word, and then maybe a few pieces of outdated technology. And I would say that that's a compliance nightmare and an accident waiting to happen. I would say that actually with the technology we have today, right, and how we can implement that technology and use it also in a compliance in a way that is fully compliant with all the various rules we have to follow, actually makes that nightmare go away. I don't think it increases the nightmare. I think it really takes it and diminishes it tremendously.
Absolutely. And look, it starts at the top, right? You have to have a culture too that buys in to that thinking, because as technology and business strategies have become completely intertwined, they are now one and the same. You really have to have that vision that trickles all the way down to every single user. So I would say my 2 cents is that it starts at the top, to have that kind of culture that can buy in, to be forward thinking and be willing to adopt the technology.
I think it really you hit the nail on the head. It really comes down a bit to the firm culture. And you see some firms that are running towards embracing technology, understanding and knowing the levels of scalability and efficiency it can create. And then you see some firms that, are hiding their head in the sand and hoping that it goes away. And
it's not. For those wondering, it's not.
Right? It's really not. And if people want to be competitive, right? If people, it's the landscape in wealth is just becoming more and more competitive. And in order to compete, you really have to have good technology.
Absolutely. All right. One more question for you here, Govinda. With all of the market volatility lately, how can advisors use MSCI's risk analytics to have more meaningful conversations with nervous clients?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So one of the features that we provide in MSCI Wealth Manager is the ability to look at forward-looking market simulations, and what that allows for. So, for example, whether it's something like tariffs or some of the geopolitical risk we're having, or in technology stocks and the concentration that we see there across the S&P and within NASDAQ, and how those technology stocks are driving so much of the returns. What we're able to do in MSCI's Wealth Manager application is we're able to create scenarios and look at how those different types of market environments might impact the individual client's portfolio. So we're not applying that to like a hypothetical portfolio. We're taking the actual assets in the client's accounts today, and you can look at what is that impact going to be. And most of the time, what we learn is that it helps advisors to help the clients know that the best thing to do is nothing at all, right? And what the advisors often need is the tools to help them have the confidence to then help the clients have the confidence, right? And so we do have these tools within MSCI Wealth Manager that allow you to not predict the future, but understand the potential outcomes of different market environments for an individual client portfolio. Maybe one client holds that concentrated stock position in Google, that they've held since the beginning, but they don't want to get rid of it. But look at how impacted it is by some of the market environment. Okay, how can we model that and help them understand that? Yeah, you might have short-term volatility, but if we look at that over the life of the investment cycle, it's really nothing to worry about. Or if it is something to worry about, take action based in very solid analytics rather than just, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I have to do something. So it's a very important part of what we do.
See, folks, no need to worry. With the right technology and a good advisor, do not panic and stay put.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me to put you on the spot and your very insightful answers, but we've come to our final and my favorite segment that I call Stack It or Whack It. So be prepared. I'm going to throw out a few technologies. They're not always necessarily wealth tech related, especially if I know you. Sometimes they're just random ideas, thoughts, and cool tech that I've seen out on the market. And you tell me if they are essentially worth the hype or not. So first one I have for you, Govinda. Client risk profiles based on social media activity and sentiment. Stack or whack?
I would have to whack that. I think that that would not be a very good way to risk profile an individual. But that's just my opinion.
Slippery slope, if anything.
Yeah, I've been wrong a number of times, but just intuitively, I feel like I'd have to look at that one pretty closely.
I think that's fair. All right, we'll go with a whack for that one. Second one, fellow equestrian here. Equestrian NFTs. You want to own a digital version of your horses? Stack or whack?
Yeah, I'd have to whack that one as well. But for some people, that might be a wonderful thing, But for me personally, yeah.
I get it. I'd rather have the real thing. So
exactly.
All right, we can agree on that.
How would you even place that? I mean, you look at the amount of money you spend on a horse over its life.
I'm like, I don't have money for an NFT.
I know, right? How would you even do that?
I was going to say, anyway. You and I both know we love to light money on fire when it comes to this hobby of ours. So,
right, yeah.
if anything, we need technology that'll figure out how to save us money when it comes to horses. But
exactly, that would be a good technology. I would like that.
That should be our side passion project. Love it.
There we go.
Well, Govinda, thank you so much. This has truly been an insightful conversation. Please, just tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and what you're working on at MSCI.
Yeah, so please, you can find me at govinda.quish at msci.com, or you can come to MSCI's website, and there's lots of different ways through the website to come to learn more about what MSCI is doing in the wealth space. You can find me on LinkedIn, so please feel free to reach out. And, this is my favorite thing to talk about. So please, please reach out and we'll have a conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the information, and be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major podcasting platforms, and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and X. Thank you all for tuning in. This episode is sponsored by MSCI Wealth, offering portfolio construction, management, and proposal solutions that help wealth management firms personalize portfolios at scale and support long-term growth. Leveraging over 50 years of expertise in indexes, risk analytics, private capital, sustainability, data, and more, MSCI Wealth helps deliver the personalized experience clients demand. Visit msci.com/wealth to learn more.